The throne room of the celestial court gleamed with otherworldly magnificence, its crystalline walls refracting light into cascades of rainbow fire that danced across every surface. Ambassador Jake Morrison stood at attention in the center of the vast chamber, acutely aware that he was the only human among hundreds of assembled Valorian nobility. His formal Earth diplomatic uniform, navy blue with gold trim, seemed painfully plain compared to the flowing, luminescent garments that adorned the alien aristocrats surrounding him. But it wasn't the grandeur of the palace that made his jaw tight and his shoulders rigid. It was the musical sound of laughter echoing from the raised dais where the royal family sat in judgment. Princess Zarathi was laughing at him. She reclined on a smaller throne beside her mother's massive seat of power, her lithe form draped in fabric that seemed woven from starlight itself. Her skin was a deep, vibrant navy blue that reminded Jake of Earth's twilight sky, and her hair, long, straight, and impossibly blonde, cascaded over her shoulders like molten gold. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped, were the color of amethysts, and they sparkled with unconcealed amusement as she regarded him. "This is the great human warrior we've heard so much about," Princess Zarathi said, her voice carrying the natural harmonics of her species. Each word seemed to resonate on multiple frequencies at once. "Mother, surely you jest. He's barely larger than a juvenile, and those muscles—" She gestured dismissively with one elegant hand, her fingers longer and more delicate than any human's. "I've seen more impressive physiques on our mining cast." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled court. Jake felt heat rise to his face but maintained his composure. He'd been briefed extensively on Valorian culture before this diplomatic mission. The Valorians were a warrior race, towering and powerful, with females averaging 7 feet in height and males reaching 8 feet or more. By their standards, Jake's 6'2" frame was indeed diminutive. "Princess Zarathi," he began, keeping his voice level and respectful, "I come not to impress you with physical stature, but to represent Earth in the alliance negotiations." "Oh, it speaks," Zarathi interrupted, eliciting another round of laughter from the courtiers. "And with such confidence, too. Tell me, little human, what exactly did you do to earn the title of warrior? Defeat a particularly aggressive insect, climb a moderately tall tree." Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he maintained his diplomatic mask. He'd faced worse than mockery. He'd survived the Battle of Kepler Station, held the line at the siege of Mars Colony, earned 3 medals of valor in humanity's desperate fight for survival against the Krell swarm. But he couldn't say any of that without risking interstellar incident. The Valorians didn't respect boasting. They respected action. "Your Highness," he tried again, "I understand that by your physical standards, humans may seem—" "May seem?" Zarathi rose from her throne, descending the steps with predatory grace. As she approached, Jake was struck by just how much she towered over him. Even in her relatively slender form, she stood nearly 7.5 feet tall, her athletic build suggesting strength that could easily overpower him. "There is no may seem about it, human. You are small, weak, and fragile. Your species survived its first contact with hostile aliens through luck and the intervention of more powerful races. You are here because the Alliance Council took pity on your kind, not because you earned your place." She circled him slowly, appraising him like a predator examining prey. Jake stood perfectly still, though every instinct screamed at him to defend himself, to push back against her condescension. But diplomacy required patience, required swallowing pride. "Look at him, Mother," Zarathi called back to the throne. "He won't even meet my eyes, so much for the vaunted courage of humanity's warriors." That struck deeper than Jake wanted to admit. He'd been trained to show deference to royalty, to avoid direct eye contact unless invited. But in Valorian culture, he suddenly realized that deference might be interpreted as weakness. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his gaze to meet Princess Zarathi's amethyst eyes. "I look away out of respect for your station, your highness," he said quietly, "not out of fear." For a moment, something flickered in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or reassessment, but it was quickly replaced by that same mocking smile. "Respect? How quaint! On Valoria, we don't respect those who cannot." "Enough." The single word from Queen Lysarathi thundered through the throne room with such force that the crystalline walls themselves seemed to vibrate. The laughter died instantly. Every Valorian in the chamber froze, and Jake saw fear flash across faces that moments before had been filled with amusement. The queen rose from her throne, and Jake understood immediately where Princess Zarathi had inherited her beauty. But where the princess was grace and mockery, the queen was power incarnate. She stood 8 feet tall, her navy blue skin marked with intricate silver patterns that Jake now recognized as battle honors. Her blonde hair was bound in elaborate braids woven with what looked like fragments of crystallized starlight, and her eyes blazed with an intensity that made him want to look away despite his earlier resolve. Queen Lysarathi descended from the dais, and the assembled nobility parted before her like water before a ship's bow. She moved with the confidence of someone who had never questioned her right to command, who had earned her crown through trial by combat as Valorian tradition demanded. "Zarathi," the queen said, her voice now soft but carrying an edge sharper than any blade. "Come here." The princess obeyed immediately, all trace of her earlier arrogance vanished. She moved to stand before her mother, and though she was tall and powerful by human standards, she seemed suddenly small in the queen's presence. "You mock this human for his size," Queen Lysarathi said. "You laugh at his appearance and question his worth as a warrior. Tell me, daughter, have you read his file?" Zarathi's confident expression faltered. "I glanced at it, mother." "You glanced at it," the queen repeated, her tone dripping with disapproval. "Then allow me to educate you and the rest of this court on exactly whom you have been insulting." The queen turned to address the entire assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "Ambassador Jake Morrison, human, age 32 standard cycles, enlisted in Earth's military forces at age 18. Served with distinction in the human Krell War, a conflict in which his species faced an enemy with superior numbers, superior technology, and superior physical capabilities." Jake felt his heart begin to pound. He hadn't expected this. "At the Battle of Kepler Station," the queen continued, "then Lieutenant Morrison held a defensive position for 72 hours against overwhelming Krell forces. His unit was ordered to retreat, to abandon the station and the 10,000 civilians sheltering there. Do you know what he did, Zarathi?" The princess shook her head silently. "He refused the order. He and 47 soldiers held that position until reinforcements arrived. Only 12 of them survived. Morrison was among them, though he suffered injuries that would have killed most beings. He was awarded the Terran Star of Valor, their highest military honor. The throne room was absolutely silent now. Jake could feel hundreds of eyes on him, but they no longer looked at him with amusement. The weight of those gazes had changed to something else, something like respect. At the siege of Mars Colony, the Queen went on relentlessly, Captain Morrison led a counter-assault against Krell forces that had breached the colony's defenses. He personally engaged 3 Krell warriors in close combat, creatures that stand 9 feet tall and possess natural armor plating. He killed all 3 with nothing but a combat knife and his wits. Queen Lysarathi moved to stand beside Jake, and he felt dwarfed by her presence. But when she looked down at him, there was no mockery in her eyes, only acknowledgement. "This small, weak, fragile human," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "has more confirmed kills in personal combat than any warrior currently serving in the Valorian Royal Guard. His tactical analyses are studied in Alliance military academies across 17 star systems, and he earned his ambassadorship not through political connections or birth, but through service, sacrifice, and an unbreakable will to protect those who cannot protect themselves." The Queen turned back to her daughter, and her expression hardened. "You judged him by his appearance, by his size compared to ours. You saw difference and assumed inferiority. That is not the Valorian way. That is not how I raised you, and it is not behavior befitting a princess of the realm." Princess Zaratha's face had gone through several shades of emotion, shock, shame, and something else Jake couldn't quite identify. She looked at him now, really looked at him, and he saw her reassessing everything about him. "Kneel," the Queen commanded. For a heartbeat, Jake thought she was speaking to him, and he began to lower himself. But the Queen's hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Not you, Ambassador Morrison," she said quietly. "Her." The gasp that went through the throne room was audible. Princess Zaratha's eyes widened in shock. For a member of the royal family to kneel before anyone but the reigning monarch was virtually unheard of. It was a gesture of profound respect, of acknowledgement of superiority in some form, martial, moral, or otherwise. "Mother," Zarathi began, "you insulted a warrior whose deeds deserve honor, not mockery," Queen Lysarathi said firmly. "You brought shame upon yourself and upon this court with your casual cruelty and willful ignorance. You will kneel before Ambassador Morrison and offer formal apology, or you will be stripped of your title and privileges until you learn the humility that true warriors must possess." The princess's amethyst eyes met Jake's, and he saw a storm of emotions there, pride warring with shame, anger battling with grudging respect. For a long moment, she stood frozen, and Jake wondered if she would actually refuse. Then slowly, gracefully, Princess Zarathi lowered herself to one knee before him. Her blonde hair fell forward, shielding her face, and when she spoke, her musical voice was quiet but clear. "Ambassador Jake Morrison of Earth," she said formally, "I have wronged you with my words and my assumptions. I judged you by superficial measures and found you wanting, when in truth it is I who was found wanting. I have dishonored myself and my people with my behavior. I ask your forgiveness and offer my respect to a warrior whose deeds speak louder than any physical stature." Jake stood very still, aware that the entire future of Earth's relationship with Valoria might hinge on this moment. Part of him, the part that still stung from her earlier mockery, wanted to make her suffer a little longer. But he'd been a soldier too long to indulge in petty revenge. "Your Highness," he said, keeping his voice gentle, I accept your apology, and I hope that this can be the beginning of true understanding between our peoples, rather than the end of diplomatic relations." He extended his hand, a human gesture, but one that had become common in interstellar diplomacy. Princess Zarathi looked at it for a moment, then placed her hand in his. Her hand was easily twice the size of his, her fingers long and elegant, and her skin was warm to the touch. Jake helped her rise, acutely aware of the strength in her grip, the power she could bring to bear if she chose. Standing, she towered over him once again, but the dynamic between them had fundamentally shifted. She studied his face with new eyes, and Jake found himself studying hers in return. Up close, he could see the delicate patterns in her navy blue skin, subtle variations in shade that created almost imperceptible designs. Her amethyst eyes were striking, with depth and intelligence that her earlier mockery had hidden. "You are full of surprises, Ambassador Morrison," she said quietly for his ears alone. "I underestimated you grievously." "Most people do," Jake replied with a slight smile. "We humans have gotten used to it. We're short, we're not particularly strong by galactic standards, and we're relative newcomers to the interstellar community. But we're also stubborn, adaptable, and we don't give up easily." Something like admiration flickered across Zarathi's features. "I am beginning to see that," she said. Then, louder for the benefit of the court, "Mother, with your permission, I would like to request that Ambassador Morrison serve as my personal liaison during the alliance negotiations. I believe I have much to learn about humanity, and who better to teach me than their finest warrior?" Queen Lysiratha's expression softened slightly, the closest thing to a smile Jake had seen from her. "An excellent suggestion, daughter. Ambassador Morrison, do you accept?" Jake looked between the queen and the princess, reading the currents of Valorian politics beneath the surface. This was an olive branch, a way to turn a potentially disastrous first meeting into an opportunity for genuine connection. It was also, he suspected, a test of some kind. "I would be honored, your majesty," he said with a respectful bow. The queen nodded regally. "Then it is settled. Court is dismissed. Princess Zarathi, you will escort Ambassador Morrison to the diplomatic quarters and ensure he has everything he requires." As the assembled nobility began to file out of the throne room, still buzzing with whispered conversation about the unprecedented scene they'd witnessed, Princess Zarathi offered Jake her arm in a formal gesture of escort. "I truly am sorry," she said as they walked together through the crystalline corridors of the palace. "I have been sheltered, perhaps, raised to believe in Valorian superiority without question. My mother has been trying to teach me that strength comes in many forms, but I fear I have been a poor student. We all have prejudices we need to overcome," Jake said diplomatically. "I came here expecting to be looked down on, literally and figuratively, but I also came prepared to prove that humanity deserves its place in the Alliance." Zarathi glanced down at him, and this time there was warmth in her expression rather than mockery. "I think you have already accomplished that, at least within these palace walls. The story of what happened today will spread throughout the capital by nightfall. The human who made a princess kneel." She laughed, but it was a different sound now, genuine rather than cruel. "My reputation will never recover. I could release a statement saying you acted with grace and dignity," Jake offered with a slight smile. "Would you?" She seemed surprised. "Of course. We're supposed to be building bridges between our peoples, not burning them. Besides," he added, You apologized with real courage. It takes strength to admit when you're wrong, especially in front of your entire court. That deserves recognition, not mockery. Princess Zarathi stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the soft, refracted light of the crystalline corridor, she seemed to glow from within, and Jake felt something shift in his chest. An awareness of her not just as a political figure or former antagonist, but as a person. A beautiful, complex person who had just shown unexpected vulnerability. "You are not what I expected, Jake Morrison," she said softly, using his name for the first time without his title. "I think the next few weeks will be interesting." "I think you're right," Jake agreed, meeting her amethyst eyes steadily. "And for what it's worth, Your Highness, you're not what I expected either." A smile played at the corners of her lips, a real smile this time, free of arrogance or mockery. "Perhaps we are both full of surprises." As they continued walking through the palace, Jake reflected on the strange turn his mission had taken. He'd come to Valoria expecting to be dismissed, underestimated, possibly even humiliated. Instead, he'd been publicly honored by a queen, received a formal apology from a princess, and gained a liaison who seemed genuinely interested in understanding humanity rather than dismissing it. The princess had laughed at the human warrior, but when the queen said, "Kneel," everything had changed. And Jake suspected that this was only the beginning of a very complicated, very unexpected relationship between two very different beings. Sometimes, he thought, the best diplomatic victories came from the most unlikely circumstances. And sometimes, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all.